Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. The Sensex and the Nifty declined for the second day, ending the week 1% lower. Except IT and PSU banks, all sectoral indices end in the red this week. The rupee continues to weaken against the dollar, hitting another record low, but the Indian currency has managed to outperform its peers. The US Federal Reserve cuts rates by 25 basis points. Fed Chair Jerome Powell says he will not step down if the incoming president asks for his resignation. Adds the president does not have the legal power to sack or demote him. SBI reports a 28% profit growth as higher treasury income lifts Q2 earnings. Asset quality improves, but net interest margins drop to a 9-quarter low. Swiggy's 11,300 crore rupee IPO is fully subscribed on the final day, led by qualified institutional buyers. Investors bid for more than 3 times the share on offer. Fresh trouble for Zomato and Swiggy. Sources say an initial probe by the Competition Commission finds both companies breached competition law by signing exclusive agreements with partners. Russia's Vladimir Putin says he's ready for a dialogue with incoming US President Donald Trump. Putin says Trump acted like a man after the assassination attempt in Pennsylvania. Israeli attacks continue in southern Lebanon and Gaza, taking the death toll higher. Hezbollah claims it targeted a naval base in Haifa. The second such attack in less than 24 hours. Clashes break out between Israeli football fans and alleged pro-Palestinian supporters during a football match in Amsterdam. Chief Justice DY Chandrachud gets emotional, wiping tears from his eyes on his last working day. His 2-year tenure at the helm has been the longest in the last 12 years. It is essential to act now, says the UN General Secretary on the eve of the annual climate summit COP29 in Azerbaijan's capital Baku, warns global leaders against underestimating the risks of catastrophic climate breakdown. Well, let's head straight to the market action. The Sensex and the Nifty ending a range-bound session with marginal losses. This is the second day of declines that we've seen on Dalal Street, with both the indices losing 1% for the week. Now, this week, the 25 basis point rate cut announced by the US Fed is largely in line with market expectations. Mid-cap saw sharper cuts today, with the mid-cap index down by about 750 points. That's the market action for you today. But let's talk about the big global story. US Fed Chief Jerome Powell has said he will not step down if President-elect Trump fires him or asks him to resign. Addressing the media, Powell said that Donald Trump is not permitted under law to fire the Fed chief. Remember, Powell was appointed by Donald Trump during his first term. Trump clashed with Powell multiple times in his first term and publicly called for interest rates to be eased. Take a look.
Do you believe the president has the power to fire or demote you, and has the Fed determined the legality of a president demoting at will any of the other governors with leadership positions?
Not permitted under the law.
Well, that is the Fed chief then. In the money market, the dollar continues to strengthen and the rupee has hit another record low today. The rupee closing at an all-time low of 84.38. But the rupee is still outperforming its emerging market peers. Lata is here with more. Stronger dollar, weaker rupee, Lata.
Yes, that's right. It has been a weak week for the Indian currency as well. Before the US elections, Monday, it was 84.06. And by end of week, 84.38. So that's a 0.4% fall, largely because of hectic selling of equities by foreign portfolio investors. And, you know, when they sell equities, they take back dollars, so they buy dollars. And that's why dollar strength was what we noted. But the bigger reason is that globally, the dollar strengthened, hugely. And most Asian currencies, in contrast, started falling. And we saw big falls compared to the 0.4 that the rupee fell. Most of the big currencies, the yen, yuan, won, ringgit, Thai baht, they have fallen between 1.5% and 2.2%. So the rupee actually is a standout performer, along with the Indonesian rupiah as well. Now, the reason why you're seeing this fall is because the expectation is that the Trump administration will impose tariffs. And in 2018, when tariffs were imposed by US on Chinese goods, China responded by depreciating the currency so that Chinese goods are cheaper. And therefore, the expectation is that there will be Chinese depreciation, that is renminbi depreciation this time around as well. Now, India runs a current account deficit with China, and therefore, if the renminbi depreciates, Chinese imports will rush into India, and therefore, India will also want to depreciate its currency somewhat. That is the expectation. The market is expecting the yuan, which is already depreciated from about 7.07 to 7.17. They expect it to fall to 7.30. So further depreciation of the rupee is expected by the market. Of course, the sale of Indian equities by FPIs is another reason why the rupee is still seen as likely to.
All right, Lata, many thanks for joining us. That was the rupee. Let's talk about the Bitcoin. It continues its record-breaking run, hitting an all-time high of $76,900. The cryptocurrency's four-day rally has been fueled by Trump's victory as the U.S. president. Now, the U.S. Federal Reserve's 25 basis point rate cut also supported prices. Bitcoin up 77% this year. The U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has appointed Susie Wiles as the White House Chief of Staff. This is the first appointment of the new Trump administration that will take charge on the 20th of January next year. Susie Wiles was one of the key campaign managers behind his election victory. She will become the first woman in U.S. history to hold the role of White House Chief of Staff. In a statement, Trump said that Susie will continue to work tirelessly to make America great again. Outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden addressed the nation and promised an orderly transfer of power. Speaking about the election defeat suffered by the Democrats, Biden said, and I quote, "Setbacks are unavoidable, but giving up is unforgivable." Take a look.
Setbacks are unavoidable, but giving up is unforgivable. We all get knocked down. But the measure of our character, as my dad would say, is how quickly we get back up. The America of your dreams is calling for you to get back up. That's the story of America for over 240 years and counting. It's a story for all of us, not just some of us. The American experiment endures. We're going to be okay.
Well, that is outgoing President Joe Biden. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin congratulated President-elect Donald Trump. Speaking at an event in Sochi, President Putin said that Russia was ready for a dialogue with Trump. Putin also said Trump acted like a man after the assassination attempt in Pennsylvania.
I take this opportunity to congratulate Donald Trump with his election to the post of the President of the United States of America. I have said already that we will be working with any head of state who would be trusted by the American people. Indeed, this is going to be like this in practice.
And incoming President Trump has promised to end the war in Ukraine. Before his inauguration, a Kremlin spokesperson termed Trump's declaration as an over-exaggeration.
To propose something in order to solve the Ukrainian crisis, even before his inauguration. Of course, there was a little bit over-exaggeration that you would be able to do it overnight. Certainly there's nothing that can heal this problem overnight. Well, but at least if it's going to, new administration is going to look for peace, not for continuation of the war.
And let's talk about crude oil prices remaining largely steady even as Israel intensified its strikes and conducted raids in both Lebanon and Gaza. According to media reports, at least 13 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli attacks on North Gaza, with 4 more killed elsewhere in the war-torn enclave. Israel's military offensive has killed around 13 Palestinians in northern Gaza today. Israel has also ordered residents in Gaza City to evacuate. Parts of the city have witnessed airstrikes at multiple locations, including residential buildings and refugee camps. Israeli attacks also continued in southern Lebanon, where 52 have died in the last 24 hours. This as Hezbollah said that its artillery shelled Israeli forces in southern Lebanon. The Lebanese armed group also said it targeted a naval base near the Israeli city of Haifa with missiles. Meanwhile, violent clashes erupted over a football match in Amsterdam between fans of Israeli football team and pro-Palestinian protesters. Israeli officials have said that 10 Israelis have been injured and 2 people remain missing. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said the country will dispatch planes to bring back its citizens from Amsterdam. Well, back home, Swiggy's initial public offer has been subscribed over 300% on the last day so far. The subscription was led by qualified institutional buyers who booked the issue 6 times over. The portion allocated to retail investors has also been fully subscribed. Remember, the company plans on raising over 11,000 crore rupees from this public issue. So that is Swiggy and its IPO. But staying with Swiggy, fresh trouble for both Zomato and Swiggy. Sources tell us that an initial probe by the Competition Commission has found that both companies breached competition law by signing exclusive agreements with partners, essentially restaurants. Parikshit is standing by now to take us through the details. Parikshit, what are the findings of the CCI probe?
Well, the CCI had received complaints from certain restaurant bodies earlier this year, to be specific, in March this year. And the DG investigation in the Competition Commission of India began his probe, which has found that aggregators like Swiggy and Zomato were breaching and were in violation of competition law of the country. Essentially, they entered into exclusive agreements with their partners, which allowed them to promote the growth of certain restaurant chains or restaurants exclusively on the platform. This, the CCI initial investigation believes, is in violation of competition laws and can attract action as well. Now, these are initial findings. The report will be sent to to both Swiggy and Zomato. Their statements will also be called for. They will be given a chance to explain themselves. That process has not yet happened. Currently, this is at an investigation stage. These are the findings of the probe. What the CCI will now do is, after hearing all the parties and stakeholders, it will adjudicate on the matter and then give a ruling. And that will be the course of action that will be taken. So this is where the case is, but definitely not good news coming in for both Swiggy and Zomato.
All right, Parikshit, many thanks for joining us. We will head into a break, but up next, Chief Justice DY Chandrachud gets emotional on his last day in office. That and more when we return. Well, the big earnings of the day. State Bank of India reporting a good set of numbers for Q2 with a higher treasury income boosting profit margins, however, dropping to a 9-quarter low. Abhishek is standing by with the key numbers from SBI. Abhishek.
Well, SBI reported a mixed set of numbers. The deposit growth was really strong. However, the net interest margin came in at 9-quarter low. So in terms of deposit growth, it grew by 9.1% YOY and about 4.5% sequentially. The sequential growth is one of the best that you are seeing in last 6 quarters. Advances growth were below the analyst estimate. It came in at 14.9% YOY and less than 3% sequentially. So the net interest margin came under pressure. It came to 3.14% versus 3.22% in the previous quarter. Even the domestic net interest margin declined to 3.27% versus 3.35% in the previous quarter. Now, treasury income was robust at about 4,640 odd crores, which was an increase of 130% YOY and about 79% sequentially. The NPA provisions declined sharply, and if you check, the annualized credit cost is at 2 to 3 quarter low, coming in at 0.38% versus 0.48% in the previous quarter. Asset quality continues to see improvement. The gross NPA and net NPA ratio are one of the best that you are seeing in last 9 or 10 years. So slippages declined to 4,951 crore. Analysts were working with a number of 6,500 crore. This compares to more than 8,700 crore in the previous quarter. So the annualized slippage ratio is at 0.51% versus 0.93% in the previous quarter. Asset quality has improved. Gross NPA ratio is down to 2.13% versus 2.21% in the previous quarter. Even the net NPA ratio has improved by 4 basis points on a sequential basis. In terms of the performance, the NI is largely in line with our poll, and thanks to treasury income, which was on the higher side, the PAT beat our poll. Back to you.
All right, Abhishek, many thanks. And Tata Motors missing muted estimates in Q2. Sudarshan is standing by with the details. Sudarshan, what's gone wrong here for Tata Motors?
So first, talking about the numbers, it's an all-round miss. Both Tata Motors and JLR have missed even muted expectations. And it's basically on the back of muted domestic demand. If you look at the volumes of Tata Motors, volumes had fallen both sequentially and year on year. And even JLR says production constraints has weight on JLR's earning, and that's the reason like it has also missed estimates on all the fronts. Talking about the numbers, for consolidated numbers for Tata Motors, profit was down 11%, revenue has fallen 4%, EBITDA was down 12%, and margin has fallen more than 100 basis points. For JLR, revenue was down 6%, EBITDA margin was down more than 300 basis points, and even EBIT margin has fallen almost 90 basis points. So what does JLR say about the earnings? It says profitability was impacted by temporary aluminium supply constraint and also because of hold placed on more than 6,000 vehicles for additional quality control checks. So these are the two reasons that JLR is highlighted, and because of these two reasons, profit has come down. About the outlook remains healthy, at least from JLR side. It says production and wholesale volumes are expected to recover strongly in H2, and both production and wholesale volumes are expected to pick up very strongly. Like H2 FY25, company is expecting it to be very strong in comparison to H1 FY25, and on the back of that, it holds on to FY25 guidance for revenue of 30 billion pounds and EBIT margin of at least 8.5% or little more than that. Talking about Tata Motors outlook, it remains cautious on near-term domestic demand, but expects an all-round improvement in performance in H2 FY25. So it can be divided in two parts. Earnings for Q2 FY25 are an all-round miss, but outlook by both JLR and Tata Motors is looking healthy.
All right, Sud, many thanks for joining us. Well, an emotional last working day for Chief Justice DY Chandrachud, who retires on the 10th of November. Justice Chandrachud got emotional and was seen wiping tears as Justice Narasimha hailed his extraordinary ability as a lawyer. Justice Rishikesh Roy also had words of praise for the CJI, who also happened to be his classmate. Chandrachud's 2-year tenure as the Chief Justice has been the longest in the last 12 years.
I had the great opportunity of appearing before him and also sitting with him.
Yes, well, that's...
I must say that at both instances I failed to come up to, as a lawyer, extraordinary ability, as a judge, extraordinary ability, as we were all appearing from the bar, and his patience, his participation in the proceedings, whoever appears, it was amazing.
You asked me, what keeps me going. It's this court which has kept me going. Because there's not a single day when you feel that you have not learned something, that you have not had an opportunity to serve society. And there's no greater feeling for a judge than to be able to serve those in need and people you would never meet, people you possibly don't even know of, people whose lives you have the ability to touch without ever having seen them. So I'll conclude by thanking all of you. Each one of you, believe me, each one of you has taught me so much that I didn't know about law, and more importantly, what I didn't know about life. Because in all that all of you said to me in the court, I learned so much about life. I learned so much about life today. I mean, those 45 matters which we did. There's no case which is similar to an earlier case. So in every case that you decide here, you learn so much about what's happening in society, what's happening across the nation. If I ever hurt any one of you, I would like to just say Michhami Dukadam. Please forgive me for something which I didn't intend to ever say or do.
So what would Justice Chandrachud's legacy be? What were the key judgments delivered during his tenure? Ashmit has compiled a list, joins us now. It has been a long career for DY Chandrachud. Ashmit, take us through some of the key milestones, the key verdicts.
Well, borrowing a few words from what Justice Chandrachud had said in a famous rebuke to a persistent lawyer, Justice Chandrachud had once remarked that the lawyer could not spend a day under the pressure of the CJI's chair. Well, after a distinguished career as a judge, stretching across 24 years, India's 50th Chief Justice, that's Justice DY Chandrachud, can finally breathe easy as he steps down, marking his last working day in the Supreme Court. He began his practice as a lawyer in the Bombay High Court, swiftly moved up the ranks, was appointed as the additional Solicitor General in 1998. After a brief stint, he was appointed as a judge of the Bombay High Court, a challenge he gladly welcomed, grappling with commercial disputes for 13 years in the Bombay High Court. He was elevated as the Chief Justice of the Allahabad High Court in 2013. But the road eventually led to the Supreme Court. Justice Chandrachud was elevated as a Supreme Court judge in 2016. And 6 years later, in November of 2022, he assumed charge as the Chief Justice of India, as the 50th Chief Justice of India. Now, in the 8 years at the Supreme Court, Justice Chandrachud pronounced 620 judgments. We look at the ones that made the biggest of impacts and the loudest of headlines. Ayodhya verdict is right on top. In a departure from convention, the Supreme Court judgment was silent on who authored it. Justice Chandrachud is believed to be the author. This judgment paved the way for the new Ram temple, which in turn led to the Prime Minister completing the Pran Pratishtha ceremony in January of 2024, just ahead of the elections. The judgment has been celebrated and criticized in equal measure. Article 370, Justice Chandrachud-led bench upheld the centre's controversial decision to not only abrogate Article 370, but also to strip statehood, reducing J&K to a union territory. The Supreme Court noted that Article 370 was only transitory in nature. Electoral bonds. He also brought some pain to the centre in the form of striking down of the electoral bond scheme as unconstitutional. The outgoing CJI held that bonds left room for quid pro quo with corporates seeking favours for donating money. The timing of the judgment was critical, coming just a couple of months ahead of 2024 Lok Sabha elections. Privacy. One of the most lasting impressions left by the 50th CJI is granting Indians a new right, the fundamental right to privacy. He also built on this verdict to dissent against the majority judgment upholding Aadhaar's legality. Justice Chandrachud had flagged the possibility of surveillance using Aadhaar. Section 377. Another big defense of civil rights was the striking down of Section 377 of the IPC, which criminalized gay sex. Justice Chandrachud was a part of the 5-judge bench. This judgment served as the foundation for securing rights of the LGBTQ community. Same-sex marriage, but while Justice Chandrachud struck down criminalization of gay sex, he could not find it in him to also allow the right to marry the same-sex couples. In an elaborate judgment, he recognized the need to remove stigma from the LGBTQ community, but left it to the Parliament to decide this issue. The AJR curative plea. With his pedigree and experience in corporate litigation, the outgoing CJI also decided key legacy issues like the AJR issue. He rejected the curative plea of telcos who had been claiming arithmetic errors. In doing so, he reaffirmed the 1.43 lakh crore rupee demand. Jet Airways liquidation. The airline, after 25 years of operations and 5 years of insolvency, will now be sold for scrap. The Supreme Court expressed frustration with 5 years of IBC proceedings not yielding any results and directed for the airline's liquidation. And finally, Baiju's insolvency. The EdTech company tried to escape insolvency proceedings by settling payment dispute with the BCCI. The Supreme Court expressed unhappiness with procedural irregularities and sent the company back into insolvency. Now, this was just skimming from the top of his vast body of work, 620 judgments, mind you. And while many of these key decisions have left some parties unhappy, even the strongest of critics have often tipped their hats to the 50th Chief Justice of India.
Ashmit, many thanks for joining us. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC-TV18. Stay tuned. We're back in a moment with more.